When men stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. G.K. Chesterton. This observation by Chesterton, an English theologian at the turn of the 1900s, gives a great view of current culture. Denominational church has declined steadily and now rapidly in the last few years, with more and more people identifying as spiritual but not religious. What does this have to do with me? Well, stay tuned and find out. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Welcome back to Church Public. I am Matt Odegaard, and I appreciate you stopping by here today. I started Church Public to help people understand and follow Jesus and exist in the public square. Go into the public square and not get super confused with all the things that are going on and keep your Christianity, keep your faith. I hope this podcast has helped you do that. If you haven't already, like and subscribe. You can go back in time, listen to a bunch of different episodes on a bunch of different current events and some theological issues that we've brought up over the past months and year now. And I hope that this brings you some kind of edification into how you're supposed to live, what you're supposed to do. That's my goal. My goal is to help you. And if you find this helpful, if you wouldn't mind, again, liking, sharing, giving a review, and maybe even sharing it with a friend who you think needs to hear this. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We'll be kind of reviewing some of the current events, but really what we'll be doing is taking a 30,000-foot view into the state of this culture and why it is where it is and how we got to here and maybe where we go going forward. So we want to look at that because it helps us understand where things are so we know how to proceed. We're going to look at what this culture is doing and really what it has done as it has progressed over the last years, decades, and maybe even longer. So I hope this is helpful because I want you to understand where we are so that, again, you can go out into the world and be part of it, but as Jesus says, not be exactly like it, because we're not supposed to be like the culture. We're just supposed to follow Jesus into the world and be the salt, be the light of the world. And it seems to be that's increasingly more and more difficult. So we started with this quote, and I think it bears repeating. And in fact, to be flat out honest, it's attributed to G.K. Chesterton, but there's a bunch of different people that think he didn't actually say it. Though the content of it really is in line with a lot of the things that he said and wrote over the years. So I'm going to repeat it anyway. When men stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. Chesterton was an English theologian at the turn of the 1900s, and I think this really does give us a good view of the current culture. As I mentioned in the beginning, denominational church, right? All the denominations, Baptist and Methodist and Lutheran, etc., those have all declined rather steadily and in the past few years rather rapidly, and more people, especially this younger generation, are identifying as something called or related to spiritual but not religious. Gen Z, which is the latest generation, is at the same time both more atheistic and more paganistic than prior generations. 13%, according to a Barna poll, or I think it was a Gallup poll, sorry about that. 13% is what they identify now, 13% atheistic. That's double previous generations, like the millennial generation, which was somewhere in the 6% range. And at the same time, Gen Z is 3 times more interested in things like witchcraft. I just checked before I did this. The hashtag Witches of Instagram now has 8.6 million posts. That's a lot of posts about witchcraft. Not to mention, as I've talked about before, tarot cards are at an all-time high. Horoscope apps are some of the most popular and ludicrous. True, but lucrative is what I meant to say. The most lucrative apps on the internet and on the app stores. You have tarot cards, Ouija boards. The horoscopes, crystals are really super popular for their healing powers and etc., which is, again, an interesting contrast when you think, well, I don't believe in this all-powerful God that created the universe, but this crystal rock will definitely heal all of my problems. When you put it like that, it sounds a little interesting, but this is the reality of the generation that we're in right now. In many places around the country, and especially in Western Europe, which we'll look at a little bit today because Europe tends to be a predecessor of where, or maybe a forecaster is a better word, a forecaster of where America goes. This has just been true over generations and generations. Europe will get into something first, and then America will adopt it. So what we see in many places in Western Europe, again, I'm talking about westernized countries in Europe, there has been, over the decades, a rejection of God. And in many cases, it's not led to atheism, as you might think. I don't believe, right? The statement would be, I don't believe in God, so I believe in no God. Rather, it's instead led to superstition and neo-paganism. Now, paganism, just for a moment, is these older religions and these older gods, these pre-Christian, these pre-civilization gods, the gods and goddesses of Rome and Greece and Norse mythology, right, which we'll talk about a little bit. These gods, these paganistic rituals are having a huge resurgence. You may or may not have heard about these things, but whether or not you've heard about it, you've probably seen some of it, which we'll come to in a little bit. Before we get to that, I just want to talk about Sweden. The reason we want to talk about Sweden is Sweden has been brought out as the pinnacle of secularism and socialism. You've heard this. You've probably heard from many politicians and celebrities that Sweden is a model of socialism and it's a model of secularism. They've done all the things well. And it also is a model, whether or not you want to call it that, of pagan resurgence. Author and sociologist Rodney Stark, in the book The Triumph of Faith, wrote, quote, more than 20% of Swedes, people in Sweden, say they believe in reincarnation. Half believe in mental telepathy. Nearly 1 in 5 believes in the power of lucky charms. A third believe in New Age medicine, such as healing crystals, right? We just talked about that. Continuing on the quote, 20% would consider purchasing their personal horoscope, 10% would consult a medium, and nearly 2 out of 5 believe in ghosts. End quote. That's just some of the things that are going on in Sweden. And remember, Sweden was a very Christian country up until the recent years. So this is a big change. Moving over to Iceland, and I know we don't talk about Iceland very much, but some of these studies are interesting. A 2016 poll performed in Iceland by the Association of Icelandic Atheists showed 0.0% of Gen Z in Iceland believe God created the world. 0% of all young people in Iceland believe that there's a God and he created the world. 0. Zip. Zilch. Nada. None. This is all still while the official Church of Iceland is the Icelandic Evangelical Lutheran Church. That's kind of a big shift if you look at it. And in what seems to me like a nod to the Lord of the Rings, this author, Stark, lets us know that, quote, 34% of Icelanders believe in reincarnation and another 16% aren't sure about it, but here's some interesting things. Continue on the quote. Moreover, a national survey found that 55%, more than half of Icelanders believe in the existence of Huldufolk. Huldufolk, according to this author, is, or are, quote, hidden people, such as elves, trolls, gnomes, and fairies. I'm going to stop the quote there and continue in a moment. So people in Iceland, more than half, really believe in elves, trolls, gnomes, fairies, etc. Again, Lord of the Rings, real life, whatever it is. Continuing on the quote. Consequently, planned highways. So this is where I'm going to pause the quote for another second and give an editorial on this. These things matter. Why? Why are we talking about weird fairies and Lord of the Rings things? Because when people believe in other worldly things, policies from government in real life happen. Here is an example. Quote, consequently, planned highways are sometimes rerouted so as not to disturb various hills and rocks where Hindu folk may live. Icelanders planning to build a new house often hire, quote, within a quote, elf spotters, end quote, to ensure their site does not encroach on Hindu folk settlements, end quote. This is Iceland, but as I mentioned, many of these Western European countries are foretellers of where America is going. And we'll get to America in a moment. But I bring this to your attention. I know you're saying, I don't live in Iceland. I don't care about Iceland. That's what you're saying. But maybe you do. Regardless, The point here is, as westernized society as a whole, as far as I'm looking at it, and I look at a lot of these more weird things, we're moving in this direction to a more atheistic, but more than just atheistic, to a more paganistic, like the old gods, the old ways, the old rituals of things that were eliminated. I mean, just to give you perspective, more than 1,000 years ago, Iceland had Christianity brought in, and some of these old ways were moved. And Norway, Sweden, in the same type of way. These old ways were removed and made way for a more westernized religion. And these westernized religion actually civilized some of these other practices, which I'm not going to talk a lot about today, but some of the paganistic practices, like child exposure. If you don't know what child exposure is, in the old ways, in all of these civilizations, in Greece, in Rome, in the Nordic countries, Sweden, and Norway and Iceland, if you didn't want a baby, you would just set it outside. And that's it. And your baby would disappear. That's brutal. This is the way they did things in some of these pagan ritualistic ceremonies. This is what happened. So that's why we talk about this. The Judeo-Christian westernization of some of these countries saved countless people, just in this instance. And there's a lot more other things that we could talk about in terms of witchcraft, and I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm going to move in Iceland to another form. We talked about Lord of the Rings. Now we're going to talk about Marvel, because we compare things, right? In what seems like a weirder nod to Marvel movies, but is actually back much farther than Marvel movies, because of course they are just retelling old Norse mythology stories, which some of you learned in school and some of you didn't. But, you know, we're talking about Thor and Odin and Loki and all those. So the fastest growing religion, now this is real now, not a movie, the fastest growing religion in Iceland is actually Norse paganism. Again, Thor and Odin and Loki, like actually. Now, being a good Norwegian myself, well, at least in surname, I took interest in this uptick, and I find it fascinating. It also seems to me foreshadowing of where we're going in America. No, I don't think we're going to go Norse mythology in America in the main, but I think we are going pagan. And in fact, I would say we're already there. Just look at Burning Man or Coachella or any of the myriad concert worship experiences that occur around the country. If you remember, just a few months ago, the Houston Astroworld concert that I reported on, where there was all this weird satanic imagery and people actually died because of some of the things that were going on in that paganistic ritual. I don't know what else to call it. You could call it a concert, but when people start dying because of some of the things that are going on in these concerts, we've moved into a different place. And if you have any knowledge, and I'm not going to go into any of it really at all, of these like Coachella and Burning Man experiences, they are quite literally ritualistic pagan things, without maybe some of the sacrifices, but who knows at that point. And they literally encompass all of the things that a pagan ritual would encompass. Maybe I'll talk about that at a later time, but we really are there. While this new and old paganism is definitely on the rise, it's not actually, to me, the most concerning replacement of God. The bigger thing is this ideology. And this is what I talk about a lot here. And I'm trying to give you this 30,000-foot view today so that you can see it in clarity, as opposed to a westernized culture that we ostensibly have lived in up until maybe this point, and I don't know if we live in it anymore. At the very least, we're fractured into different segments that some people believe in a westernized culture, and some people want something vastly different that is this paganized ritualistic society. They absolutely do. And you are seeing it unfold in real time over this abortion meltdown all across America. I've played you some clips on previous episodes. You can check those out at any of your podcast places. You can check those out at churchpublic.com. People are melting down and screaming and wailing and chanting and expletive-laden rants about the potential loss of the ability to kill babies. I've covered this extensively. Again, you can go and look at this. But I just read a memo this morning from the Department of Homeland Security that had pro-abortion extremists reportedly threatening to burn down the Supreme Court building and murder justices and clerks, etc. And we've already seen firebombing of pro-life pregnancy centers and activists disrupting church services. This is happening. Of course, and this, as mentioned, is the constant profanity-laden screaming at protests around the country. This is a religion. Make no mistake. This is what I want you to see. It's not just people fighting for their rights, quote unquote. It is a religion. It operates like a religion. I'm going to give you some examples, and you don't have to believe me. You can look these up for yourself. But this is a religion. And what I see is the left, for years, has put children through education, indoctrination, and ideologies like man-made climate change, the importance of environmentalism, gender theory, critical race theory, and more. We've talked about many of these things. And when children emerge as adults or even young adults, they are fully catechized as followers of religion. That means they are enmeshed in this religion. They believe it with their heart and soul and mind and strength, 100%. Yesterday on the podcast, we looked at the rise in LGBT identification over 4 generations, from less than 1% of the entire generation to now more than 20%. And in some reports I didn't even mention yesterday, it's up to 50 or even 70%. I'm telling you, that's a large jump. Even 1 to 20% is enormous. Beyond 20 is just out of comprehension. And we just looked at the rise of paganism in Europe and America in a couple of different countries. And currently we're seeing people screaming about their sacred right of abortion. And I mean that R-I-T-E, right, not R-I-G-H-T. The difference is a right is this identification with a certain religion. It's a practice of a religion. Abortion is their sacred right. They view it as a part of their religion, whether or not they call it this. This is the application of their religion. I know sometimes you hear it argued as a constitutional right, but as I've mentioned over and over again, it's not in the Constitution. You can go and look it up for yourself and find it listed in the Constitution. You won't find it there. I'll save you a little bit of time. But they believe it's a human right to be able to kill other humans. That elevates it out of the law perspective and into the moral realm. They believe abortion is a right, R-I-T-E, because it is a part of religion. And here is an example that's a weird one, but true. The Satanic Temple, a religious organization, is now arguing in Texas to have abortion ritualized in their religion and protected as a freedom of religion clause so that they can perform abortions as part of their religion. The Satanic Temple. This is a real thing. Go and look it up. I'm not making this stuff up. This is application of their religion. Abortion is necessary to show that you have autonomy. You've heard autonomy. You've heard this word in a lot of these discussions. Autonomy is the ability to rule yourself. You are in charge, and abortion grants you the power to be in charge of yourself. That language should sound familiar to you. You should hear ringing in the back of your head all of these people saying, I would not have been able to live my life the way I wanted to live it unless I had an abortion. Did you hear how many times I said I? This is what they say, because abortion is the biggest symbol of autonomy that you can have. And then, of course, there's cancel culture, which is the religious method of excommunication and banishment when you sin against the fold. Mirroring other religions, this new religion has standards of righteousness. A Christian might quote various Bible verses in regards to right living, while this new religion has different causes that you must represent with your whole heart and your soul and your mind and your strength and, of course, your social media. And then, of course, most comparatively, instead of finding new life, the spiritual awakening through Christ that we have, again, Jesus gives us new life. That is mentioned throughout the New Testament, whether in Jesus' own words or in Paul or Peter or John, etc., James. We talk about new life a lot because you are made alive again. You are spiritually awakened. In this new religion, you must instead become woke. That is the new way. It is not the same as Christianity, but it is, in fact, a spiritual awakening. You must go through this process to find out what you didn't know before and become more woke, more aware of what is going on in the realities around you. But we're not talking about physical realities. We're not talking about biological realities. We're not talking about science or nature or what you can actually see or identify with five senses. No, in this woke spiritual awakening, you must find something within yourself, something that you may or may not have even known is there. It is clearly something beyond physical. In Aristotle's sense, he would call that metaphysical, more than physical, supernatural. All of this and more is why it's very difficult to have a conversation with the practitioners of this new religion. They don't want to dialogue about ideas and theories or even theology. They require 100% faith and acceptance. We see this every single day. All of those outside the fold will be cast out into the bitter darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, sometimes literally, as we've just talked about. See the summer of 2020, and I hate to say, most likely what is coming soon to a city near you this year. Hopefully I'm wrong, but we'll just have to wait and see. I'm already reviewing some footage of things that are happening all across the country in anticipation of this Roe decision, but also all of this election stuff that's happening. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another quote-unquote summer of love where we have fiery but mostly peaceful protests. To pull back another layer and to put it clearly into the real world, the world that's actually ruled by the God of the universe and his son Jesus, this is not new. None of this is new. This quote-unquote new religion, this quote-unquote new paganism, this leftist death cult where they need abortion as a right, it's actually the oldest thing in the book. Literally, the oldest thing in the Bible. The God, small g, of self. The God of self. And you shall be as gods. Genesis 3:5. And don't forget, it was the literal devil who made this offer to Adam and Eve. The fact that we're once again dealing with the God of self is made perfectly clear by numerous dogmatic chants we hear on the daily. Chants like, my body, my choice, you be you, live your truth, and many more like these. They all point to this idea that I am the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. I am my own God. This is the same thing we heard from the devil so many years ago in the garden. Going back not quite as far, in 2003, to give a little bit more context to this religion, the author, Michael Crichton, the Jurassic Park guy, said this in a speech about how this new religion remaps Judeo-Christian values. Today, one of the most powerful religions in the Western world is environmentalism, he says. I'll continue this quote. Environmentalism seems to be the religion of choice for urban atheists. Why do I say it is a religion? Again, this is continuing on the quote. Well, just look at the beliefs. If you look carefully, you see that environmentalism is in fact a perfect 21st century remapping of traditional Judeo-Christian beliefs and myths. There's initial Eden, a paradise, a state of grace, and a unity with nature. Then there is the fall from grace into a state of pollution as a result of eating from the tree of knowledge. And as a result of our actions, there is a judgment day coming for us all. We are all energy sinners doomed to die unless we seek salvation, which is now called sustainability. Sustainability is salvation in the church of the environment, just as organic food is its communion. That pesticide-free wafer that the right people with the right beliefs imbibe, end quote. He does go on in the speech to talk about differences between facts that can be argued and what he would call issues of faith, and I agree. This is what I'm saying. You can't have a dialogue, you can't have a discussion because we're not talking about facts. We're not talking about science. We're talking about religion. We're talking about beliefs that go beyond five senses. We're talking about beliefs that are supernatural. Now, as a Christian, we have the Bible to lean back on that has been written over thousands of years, and at some point I'll do a post about the historicity of the Bible, its authenticity, the reason we can trust the words in it. I will go through and do that at some point, but you can go on your own journey in that if you want to. I think you'll find out it is true in that sense. And still, there are issues of faith that we have to go through as Christians. What we're talking about now is this new religion with its outcomes as environmentalism, abortion, and these others that we're talking about. I want to give you one more quote from Michael Crichton in this speech that he gave, because I think it helps us understand the view that these people are taking, whether they know it or not. He says, quote, "So it is, sadly, with environmentalism, talking about the issues of facts versus faith." Continuing on the quote, "Increasingly, it seems, facts are not necessary because the tenets of environmentalism are all about belief. It's all about whether you're going to be a sinner or to be saved, whether you're going to be one of the people on the side of salvation or on the side of doom, whether you're going to be one of us or one of them." End quote. This is the point, right? You have to be in the club. You have to be woke. You have to follow along with what they're doing, or you are cast out. There is no middle way. Some Christians and Christian, I don't know what to say, celebrities will argue that there's this third way where we just compromise and we be nice to people who are going along with this. I'm telling you, there's no third way. This is their belief. They believe if you don't follow all of the rules they give you, you are wrong and you will pay for it eternally, perhaps. Christians believe that we have to follow the God of the Bible because we live in the literal kingdom of God. These two ways are not compatible. There's no middle ground that we can share in this. Again, I'm not saying be angry. I'm not saying be particularly argumentative, but we still have to stand up for actual true things. The good thing about religion the good thing about Christianity is there's a lot of science that you can correlate with it. Unfortunately, in this environmentalism, a lot of the science seems to be contradictory. And I'm not going to get into all the science today. You can go and do your own journey in that and figure out what you believe. But what I would ask is this: as you go through that, keep an open mind as to what is actually science and what is actually belief. Just as a teaser, if your belief is based on a computer model of what may possibly happen in the future, but hasn't happened yet, you may be in the realm of belief, not facts, because a computer, as amazing as it is, and a scientist, as amazing as they are, still can't predict the future. If you're predicting the future in any way, you're outside of science. That's just the reality of it. Let's go back to a couple other things. We talked about environmentalism. We talked about some of the other things, and we have to come back to abortion. This right of abortion mirrors Jesus' sacrifice, but exactly backwards. Jesus says, "This is my body given for you." The left says, "This is your body. You must give it up for me." Jesus says, "I will sacrifice my body for you to live." But this new leftist death cult says, "This is my body. You, tiny baby, must sacrifice your life so I can live." This brings us all back to where we are today in America and beyond. We've given up on God, but we have not given up on religion. That much is clear. No, we Americans, or rather the inhabitants therein, because most of these people don't like America anyway, but continue to live here, we have joined a new religion. And in fact, as I mentioned, it's the oldest one in the book, this religion of self. Or more plainly, the best way that I can put it is, you're not the boss of me. You're not the boss of me. That's what we hear in all of these different phrases and all of these different actions and all of these different applications. You're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. Whether that's said to God, whether it's said to government, whether it's said to me personally, it's all the same. You're not the boss of me. That really is, as far as I can tell, the underlying mantra of this whole thing. And it's the same words that started in the garden. You can be as gods. God is not the boss of you. You're not the boss of me. I can do whatever I want. And the libertarian, sort of conservative view said, fine, you do whatever you want. It doesn't bother me as long as you don't impact me. That was kind of a lie as well. All of your actions do have consequences. They have implications in the reality that we live. And this is what we're seeing. This is why I bring you news stories, because what happens in real life is because of the way we believe. It's been said that politics is downstream of culture. That's 100% true. The culture leads in a direction and politicians respond to that one way or another. But what that statement misses, and it frustrates me every time I hear it, is that religion is downstream of culture, or culture is downstream of religion. I said it backwards. I apologize. So the chain goes religion, culture, politics. We argue at the politics end to say, is this policy good or this policy good? We haven't spent enough time at the culture end to say what makes a good culture and what makes a bad culture. I think that's really the battle that we're in right now. But as believers in God and Jesus especially, we need to go back even a step below that and recognize that our beliefs dictate how our culture operates, and then our politics reinforce that or challenge it one way or another. We need to always get back to this point that what you believe really makes a difference in the real world. And we see this. We're seeing it unfold, as I mentioned, in real time over this abortion dialogue. What people believe that they should have the right to kill whomever they want so their life can be better is a reality. I just read a story in Canada that they're euthanizing people on the street who are homeless because they don't want those people around and they're not good for society. This is a story in Canada. We're not even talking about China or another oppressive Middle Eastern country. We're talking about Canada, the nice people, right? This is the end result of not valuing human life and creating your belief system on something besides God. You create it on yourself. Of course, the end result is I can do anything I want because you don't matter. You're not the boss of me. That's what we get back to. I'll end with this. The good news, as always, is there is a God who loves you and gave his son Jesus for you on the cross. But the hardest step in following God is that you must give up yourself and acknowledge that there is a God and you are not him. Matthew 16:24. This is where we are. As a culture, we have left God. Atheism to some degree has replaced it, but really not very much. Instead, we've replaced God with another religion that is ultimately, on the foundation, a religion of self, where I just say, you're not the boss of me, I can do whatever I want to do. Christianity, following Jesus, is the opposite of that, where you say, I am not the boss of me, God, you are. This is really the path. This is the way of Christ. And I hope this is the way that you live your life. That's all for me today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Matt Odegaard, and this is Church Public. Thanks for coming to Church Public. I really appreciate you stopping by today. If you would, take a moment, give a review, give a like, give a rating, and if you want to share it with somebody, if this was helpful, I really appreciate that because that's how we get the word out to help people understand who Jesus is, how to follow him, and how to live in this world. God bless and keep the faith.